Welcome everyone to Connected Learning TV. I'm Tara Brown and part of the team at connectedlearning.tv and Tech Director at the Digital Media Learning Research Hub. This is the 45th webinar in our series, and over the past several months, we've really enjoyed seeing a diverse community developing around our webinars. To those watching on live stream, we encourage you to use the chat stream to introduce yourselves, connect with each other, share resources, and pose questions from those here in the Google Plus Hangout. And speaking of Google Plus, we have a newly launched community called Connected Learning Community with over 300 members already, and we would love for you to be part of the conversations happening there. The link to that G Plus community should be included in the live stream chat. The URL for our public group notes Google Doc for today should be included in the live stream chat as well. We'd very much appreciate your assistance in capturing highlights and sharing resources related to today's topic. How does digital media usage shape youth learning both in and out of school? And how can youth balance both the risks and opportunities that come with this technology? Before our guest speaker, Sonia Livingstone, begins helping us frame today's conversation, I wanted to give everyone here in the Hangout a chance to introduce themselves. So we are going to start over there on the left with Chris Lawrence. Go ahead, Chris.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Lawrence. I work for the Mozilla Foundation. I run something called the Hive Learning Network in New York City, which seeks to look at out-of-school time, learning spaces, the connection of digital tools and youth, as well as working with Mozilla to build a global community of mentors and makers around similar ideas. It's great to be here and look forward to the conversation. I run something called the Hive Learning Network.
Thank you. Go ahead, Liana.
Hi everyone, I'm Leanna Gamber-Thompson, and I'm actually a postdoc working with Professor Henry Jenkins at USC, the University of Southern California, on the Media Activism and Participatory Politics Research Project. And I'm currently studying libertarian youth, and my past work has been on fandom and politics. So I'm really excited to participate today, and most of the digital learning that we look at, that I look at and most of my colleagues look at happens outside of school settings. So I'm interested to kind of see how that can map on to what students learn in school too. So.
Perfect, thank you so much. And Paul Allison.
Hi, I'm Paul Allison. I'm an English teacher here in the Bronx at Bronx Academy Senior High, and I help manage a site called youthvoices.net, and Chappelle is one of my students.
Yes, I am Chappelle Campbell, and I'm a student at Bronx Academy High School, currently graduating. So, yeah.
Perfect, thank you so much. We're joined today by Sonia Livingstone. She is Professor of Social Psychology and Head of the Department of Media and Communications at the London School of Economics and Political Science. Sonia is also Principal Investigator in the Connected Learning Research Network project, The Class, which examines the emerging mix of on- and offline experiences in teenagers' daily learning lives. So, Sonia, maybe you would like to start us off by explaining how youth are using digital technologies as part of their daily learning lives. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Tara. Well, just thinking about the premise of connected learning for a moment, and the idea that what young people would like and what will enable their learning the best is to have ways of connecting learning across home, the domestic space, the role of parents and siblings, community, the kind of peer space, the outside space, often thought of as kind of where young people can be more free, and then the school. And as Leanna said, the question of how we really kind of connect to the school, which is often the most kind of managed and controlled of those environments, but also, of course, it's the institution where education is the primary purpose. And so that notion of connected learning, in my research, we kind of start with that as an ideal. And of course, we would love kids to feel flexible and free to move their ideas, their interests, their values, what they know across those different spaces in a kind of seamlessly creative and constructive way. Then when we add the digital to that, I think the kind of project that we're all engaged with is that the digital could really enable that. The digital connection is its kind of raison d'etre, and the notion that we live now in a networked society should make connected learning all the more possible. So the project that I have within the Connected Learning Research Network, which is called The Class, is trying to do something a little different to some of the projects that are otherwise involved, which is to take a very kind of ordinary, typical classroom. Of course, one can never say a classroom is ordinary or typical. They're always, particular in different ways, and mine happens to be in London, which makes it quite atypical for a lot of the connected learning work. But I think what I want to say isn't kind of particularly British or particularly London-centric, but I do want to use some of the insights from the class project to think about the challenges of connected learning, particularly in relation to the question of risk. How do we balance those opportunities and risks that technologies could, and we really hope, enable? So the project we've been, my colleague and I, Julian Sefton-Green and I, we've been hanging out in a kind of ethnographic design study for a year with a class of children who are aged between 13 and 14. So they're American 8th grade, British year 9. And we exactly wanted to follow them across those sites of connected learning. So we began in the class, we observed the classroom, we talked to the teachers, we talked to the kids, we kind of hung out in the playground and the dining room and so on. Then we went home and interviewed the kids at home, talked to them, looked at their bedrooms, their kind of private spaces, went on Facebook with them, talked to their parents, looked at their pets, all the things that kind of go on at home. And then, and this was a bit more tricky, but we then kind of tried to follow them to wherever they go. So we went to a music class or a football practice, or we did some focus groups around the use of Twitter, or got them all to show us their phones. It was a kind of range of things to see what maybe they did with their peers. So the project tries to kind of mirror the notion of connected learning, but not for the really kind of high tech, not for the hacktivists, just for these kind of relatively ordinary kids, quite diverse in terms of both social class and in terms of ethnicity. So they're a very mixed bunch, but we thought perhaps they would be a network, actually. We thought perhaps the class would be a kind of network of 25 to 30 kids, and then there would be layers of networks out like that. Connect to the networks at home. It would connect to kind of community networks, ethnic networks, special interest networks, and so forth. I have very little to say, however, about digital media learning, and that's the kind of problem that I would like to bring to this webinar today, because we saw a lot of learning and we saw a lot of digital media use, and we didn't see it coming together very much. And there are 4 problems I thought I would kind of bring to the discussion. 2 are very familiar, and I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on them. One is the kind of endless technical problems, and you talk to parents, teachers, kids about media, and there is a litany still of kind of problems of access and adoption, really. The printer doesn't work, the Wi-Fi is too slow, there are all kinds of problems with the school systems, the teachers don't have time to kind of get into learning how the technology works. So that image of the technology might be available, but it isn't really working and it isn't really being used, I suspect we're kind of familiar with, but it's still very real. The second problem, which I think is a challenge for those keen on connected learning, is that when we talk to parents, teachers, and especially children, they have no idea of the kind of complexity and sophistication and creativity of a lot of the kinds of things that we're talking about. So, for example, after meeting with Leanna, after meeting Henry Jenkins' group, and hearing about really diverse kinds of online sites or places where kids were meeting together and being creative and forming communities. You know, we dutifully asked our class, are you part of online groups? Are you a fan of something online? Do you? Very, very little. And I think people just kind of don't realize what the fabulous possibilities are out there. So there's a huge kind of awareness raising task, I think, to make people know, you know, and to imagine that ordinary kids have any idea of what Chris does in the hive. You know, I think it's a bit like talking about what happens on Mars in a way. Okay, the two problems I wanted to bring to you that I'm really kind of puzzling about now. One is familiar but a serious problem, and it's the question of the school lockdown. We think social networking could enable learning. We think mobile phones could enable mobile learning, but mobile phones and cell phones are not allowed in schools. Facebook is not allowed in schools. And when we talk to the teachers, we said we're interested in digital technology, social media for learning. What they really wanted to talk about was cyberbullying, sexting, kids perhaps passing illegal images, how often the police had to be brought into the school to deal with the problems, the risks associated with these technologies. So it was kind of hard even to get to that conversation about what the possibilities might be, how the digital media might enable learning. And I know there are some fabulous experiments going on in different places, but really, what do I say to the teacher who says, I cannot even look at a child's cell phone, because if it has an illegal image, I'll have to call the police. So they can't even kind of, you know, they don't even want to, they confiscate it, but they won't look at it. How are we going to then enable this kind of connected learning? The second, the sort of fourth point, but the second kind of big one I wanted to raise is, and I wonder if others are finding this, is some real embedded reasons why children, but also parents and teachers, actually don't want these spaces completely connected up. Why they would like the spaces often kept separate. They would like, kids especially would like their private spaces without kind of emails from teachers or homework getting muddled up with their personal self-expression. Parents worried about the increasing burden coming from the school, that not only can they've got to get their child to school kind of fed and dressed and healthy, but also when the child comes home, school carries on, learning carries on, their responsibilities carry on. And then teachers, I was fascinated by the teachers in our school because they wanted to set up, for example, an email list so they could email all the kids per class. After a year of being in the school, they still hadn't done it. So you could say this is the easiest thing in the world to do. It's not technologically difficult. Why haven't? Maybe there were reasons why. And then they would say, once they were really in close contact with the parents, there would be a lot of communication, and the parents might start asking, why did you give my child that grade, or why is my child not happy in maths, or when you know, it's a challenge to be constantly in touch across these spaces. And so I think we've been hearing quite a lot from both parents, teachers, and kids about why there is a value in keeping those spaces separate. So there's the problem of the kind of risks that is making everyone very panicky and anxious, and then there's the desire to have separate spaces. And I'm not giving up on connected learning because I really think it sounds such a fabulous idea, but I am quite sympathetic. Perhaps I've gone a little native, but I'm quite sympathetic with those in my field site who are saying there are some real challenges here.
Thank you. There's so many things to dive into. It's interesting. So, Sonia, I mean, you were discovering this in this class, but you said their colleagues also in London are discovering the same thing. I'm just wondering if this is, you know, all of, you know, the UK that you're seeing this, or, you know, certain sections, or.
I think it's probably quite common and probably not UK specific. So the other project I have, which is called EU Kids Online, I'm working across 33 countries, mainly European, but for contingent reasons it includes Australia, for example. And they are also talking both about the kind of lockdown, because the risks are sufficiently worrying that they rule out the opportunities, if you like. And they're also talking about the often greater technical problems. I mean, I think the UK is probably quite leading in terms of getting technology functioning in schools, but still there's enough stories where it's not happening. So I was thinking, for example, about the work of Neil Selwyn, who's now in Australia, but wrote a kind of, I think, quite general book about how the promise of the technology kind of falls down on all kinds of technicalities, such that no one ever finds, or many people don't find it, that kind of seamless and easy and fluid environment to work in, because in fact there are hitches and things go wrong all the way.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it sounds like looking at some of the comments from the teachers is that technology is looked at as perhaps more of a burden rather than something that is a benefit. Oh no, I have to learn how to troubleshoot. Now I'm going to have too many parents emailing me. I'm worried I'm going to get in trouble if I see some bad image on a student's phone. So it just sounds like it's a lot of negativity. So I think it'd be interesting then to hear from Chris and Paul and Leanna on maybe if you guys have had to address some of these challenges as well in your work.
I'll jump in quick. We're moving kind of across the icon row here. One couple questions, and then maybe some comments. Is one, I'd love to know what constitutes an illegal image. What are those sort of legal tripping points that would make a phone confiscatable? And then I wonder if there isn't something. How much of this is reality based from the adults in the room, or how much of it is from a kind of a fear-based narrative about always sort of relegating to the negative about these things? Or so how many of these are based in tabloid stories, or just imagining what could be the worst possible, or are actually grounded in ways that these things have blown up in these contexts, and so there's actually tangible and real-world examples with their practice in youth that drive this thinking. So, because I often find that in the States, which we have very similar issues, especially in school contexts, the data doesn't always necessarily back up the risks and fear narrative that drives, the practice. And so, whether it's child predator law, child predator issues actually being, very low, or being able to parse out the fact that technology, regardless of what it is, isn't what's driving bullying or whatever, that the phone was just as much of an amplifier in bullying and the sort of social lives of teenagers or the slam book is, what have you. So I guess my question is, how much of it do you think is buried in these sort of dark fear places, or are they actually grounded in real events that have affected their practice?
Well, those are really good questions, Chris. And there are several ways of answering it. I guess just on the practical question of what is an illegal image, of course, no one can ever say until it's tested in the courts, but the kind of rule of thumb would be an indecent, naked or sexual image of a under 16-year-old. That would be the definition in Britain, and I think that's an international definition. And of course, sexting and certain kinds of pornography can fall within that, not necessarily knowingly by those who are taking the images, which is an interesting problem in itself. The evidence, and I could speak both from the eKids Online survey and from some of the American statistics coming out, for example, from the University of New Hampshire, David Finkelhor and Janice Wallach survey. The statistics are generally that the incidence of cyberbullying, sexting, and certainly kind of paedophilic grooming, which is people's real fear, the incidence is low. We're talking, small percentages. But the way teachers will reason, and I'd be interested in Paul's view at some point when we think about teachers, From the teacher's point of view, it still might be 1 in a class or 10 in a school who are, and I don't know how teachers estimate, but let's say a fair number will be being bullied in any school. That will have some kind of online ramification. Sexting seems to kind of come and go in kind of phases, as far as I can see, and maybe in certain year groups. And paedophiles grooming kids is, of course, extremely rare, but so serious that the teachers would say they have to be kind of wary of it. So they would say the risks are sufficiently present for them to be attentive. Then the question is, do they have to kind of lock down the whole system? And I think that's about school management strategies. I don't really think it's about kids and their use of media and the real chance of something bad happening to a child one day, but it's about how the school defends itself to its board of governors or to the parent community who need to know that safe practices are in place. And clearly what we've built around the use of technologies is a supremely risk-averse culture in which everyone is fearful of complaints or even litigation. And so the school's easiest answer is just to say, turn it off. So they wouldn't just confiscate a child's phone in a typical school. I think if they had an inappropriate or potentially illegal image on it, but they would confiscate it if it rings, if it's seen to be used. And is that a common rule in American schools? We would say kids are probably allowed to have them on their person, but if they're seen in use within class time, it's taken away. And so the prospect of using phones for collaborative learning and sharing networks is really quite a long way away from that.
Paul or Leanna, did you want to jump in on this?
Or Chappelle as well. I'd like to hear a youth perspective.
Yeah.
I was basically saying that in the UK, I think it might be like a little different. Well, not like probably in different parts of America, it's probably different too. But I was saying that here in schools that I've been in, when like if you got caught on your phone or anything like that, teachers wouldn't look at it. They would just confiscate your phone. Yeah, but if you was writing on a piece of paper and you was passing it down, then the teacher has all authority to look at the paper. So I was saying, like, is it different in the UK? Like, are y'all supposed to go through their phone to see if they sexting, or like
they're not supposed to? But I like the difference, because of course I remember when I was at school many decades ago, pieces of paper was exactly how messages were passed, and now it's all on the phone.
Chappelle was asking, like, how would they even know that people are sexting? Because
they wouldn't. There would have to be. It would have to come out some way. There would have to be some people would complain, or there would be, I don't know, there will be a fight, or there will be some reason they would be investigating. And then they would just find it easier not to have the phones in the school. And kind of the same with with Facebook. There's a lot of potential, let's say, for social networking sites also to allow that transition of things that you might learn at home coming into school. Couldn't social networking enable that? Academics are hoping that it would, but Facebook is blocked from many school systems.
Do you think it would at all help to have sort of a successful relationship in a school between like the teachers, the students, and parents, where they are embracing digital media, to have as a mentor for, say, your class or another class, to say, look, here's some best practices, here's some of the troubleshooting that we've gone through. The parents speaking up and saying, you know what, here's the things we were worried about, we're not so worried about this anymore, that kind of thing. Do you think anything like something like that set up would make a difference?
Yeah, actually, I think it would. I think people are really lacking in models, really lacking in visions of how things could be otherwise. And I know this, the kind of whole connected learning enterprise is really trying to get the message out there of how it could be done. But it's clearly very demanding to reach the kind of diversity and the very many schools that there are. So I think people don't really have a vision of what that benefit could be that is sufficiently great for them to decide to overcome the impediments. And the impediments are what kind of comes first to mind, I think.
We've had a couple of webinars where we've had parents and teachers and students sort of speaking through some of the projects they've worked on. And there was one in particular that I moderated where the students were talking about the blog posts that they write, and that was part of their actual work assignment, was to write a blog post that they then share out. And some of the conversation was around were you ever worried about comments and that kind of thing? And in fact, it came back as being a learning opportunity, because that's going to happen in the real world. You're going to have the trolls and everything else, if you're ever going to post as an adult, or regardless of age. So that might be something interesting to take a look at as well. And there's a question here. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, it's kind of the same point as on the chat, really. I think that's... people are always very keen to tell schools what they should be doing and what more they should be doing, and schools are always saying, we can't put right all the wrongs of society. But the point about a school is it's a really great place for people to kind of learn in a graduated way, with support, with guidance. And so, yes, what one would ideally like is for students to be learning some of that risk-taking but also resilience that comes with it around all the digital media in a space that is orientated towards learning, rather than, let's say, in the playground where their peers may help them but they may not. So yes, if teachers would kind of take on that larger task of in a way we used to call it media education, and maybe that's what it is. They take on that larger task of kind of teaching digital citizenship and the ways of going online through the media, rather than, many kids will get a class about how to behave, what the right way is to behave online, but it'll be a class with no illustrations, and then they have to go home and practice it. So if it were taught as part of the kind of the practices and in the corridors, so the phone wasn't just confiscated, but maybe there will be a conversation then and there about what's on the phone and how it's being used, and then it be given back to the child, so it isn't punitive. But it's very, yes, if in practice you say this to teachers, they will say, but we have so many things to do and we are so busy and so pushed, and it's the parents' job to teach. They're the ones who buy the tablets and the laptops and the phones, and it's the parents' job to be teaching their kids how to behave properly and behave well, not the teacher's job.
I was just wondering, Leanna, with the work with Henry Jenkins, and you were showing some examples to Sonia, do you think there would be an opportunity there to take that next step and say, here's how this kind of community could be set up, and, here are some of the challenges? Do you think that there's anything in that?
Well, I actually had sort of a question about what Sonia was just talking about, and I'm wondering how much the anxiety stems from just a lack of resources, because I know here in the US a lot of schools are not, teachers might have access to, this doesn't have to do so much with mobile phones, but like they might have an access to a cart of laptops for 60 kids or something, or in order to sort of implement this kind of teaching or this kind of learning, they have to take their students to a lab for 45, 50 minutes a day. And so I'm wondering how much the anxiety is kind of around like a lack of resources in general. And, when that sort of situation is set up, I think it can become just kind of have an add-on or like a burden to kind of try to bring a laptop or bring a computer or even a mobile phone in, or a tablet, when there just aren't enough to go around. I don't know if you encountered that at all in your work.
Well, there is something about that. To go back to the effort that one teacher in the school we were studying was trying to, just email the parents in the class to say this is what's happening. And at the end of the year, hadn't managed to do it, and I'd had that conversation about, as it turned out, how demanding it would be to be an email contact. So I said, well, how do you contact them? Well, he said, I pick up the phone or I write them a letter, and they write, or I write a note in the student's book, their planner, their diary, and the parent writes the notes back, and then it's very efficient. And he said it's so much quicker to read those handwritten notes than it is to load up the system and find the emails and trawl through all the messages, So maybe there's something about the design of the technology, I don't know, but the old-fashioned ways of picking up a phone or writing a handwritten note seem just still so much easier, and also, of course, easier for many parents who are not as tech-savvy and not really very ready to email. And I will say that in a number of the households we've seen where, yes, the internet is there, but maybe the parents don't really touch it, or sometimes, or they use it for a very narrow purpose, but they don't feel comfortable emailing teachers and kind of being, or looking at, looking at intranets or shared learning resources. So they can feel very kind of far away from that sometimes. So pen and paper, back to what Chappelle said. Write a note.
Okay. One of the interesting areas that as you were describing at the beginning is the separation issue. And one of the takes that I would like to throw in on that is that we block Facebook here. We could have it open if we wanted to, but it is one thing we do block, and mainly because there are two things, I think. One is privacy is something that we kind of want to respect, and Facebook is a place where students do a lot of private things. The other is we can do better than Facebook, on other sites, and that we kind of manufacture ourselves. So I don't, so for academic discourse and so forth, I don't like Facebook. It doesn't work for me. And I think it doesn't work for a lot of students. But I don't know. Did you want to say anything about that?
I feel like Facebook should be blocked in schools. The simple fact is that Facebook is, to me, is like BBM. If anybody know what BBM is, it's like BBM that people could put all types of videos, sexually, girls half naked. Like, I feel like, yes, it is a place where grandmothers, like any type of ethnic group, like can like apply on, but I just feel like it's not good in the academics thing site. But for the simple fact is that it's like Mr. Paul said, it's private. You could do anything you want without getting in trouble, and you basically you on Facebook to get popular so everybody could notice you, because like it's a show that I see, Catfish. It comes on 53, and like a lot of the people, you could disguise yourself. You could be whoever you want to be. You could take people's pictures and put them as you. And I just feel like it's not a good way, because like it's just not that, because there's a lot of people on there like rapists and things like that. And I just feel like it's just not a good academic thing, like, at all.
I mean, that's a really eloquent statement for the importance of kind of having your private space and your space that is for you, not for the school and not for learning. So I really like that statement, Chappelle. But I mean, I'm just thinking, I suppose that is a statement against the principle of connected learning in a way, which is that the place where your friends are and where you pursue your interests would somehow get connected to your life at school. I mean, it is a statement that says we need our privacy in one place and we need our learning in another place, and let's keep them separate. I don't know.
I don't hear it that way, but because I think the young people can do a lot of. I mean, I would love it to go the other way. The kind of connected learning that they can experience in school through different sites and so forth, maybe can come into their personal space and enliven that space. I wouldn't want to assume that the personal space is more interesting, than the school space.
And it's just, can I say one thing? It's just that, like, me as being like who I am, like 19, like I could say I get off track really fast. Like I could be doing my work and then I get a text message and I'm on my phone and I don't even care about the schoolwork anymore. And I just feel like that's another thing. Like people is more involved in Facebook and privacy more than they would in schoolwork. And it's just like you're not gonna get anywhere if you on the phone texting or trying to see if this guy wrote you or trying to see how many likes you get on the photo when you should be thinking about, school. So like that I just feel like because I work on computers, so basically like it'll be easy for kids not to even do their work, just to come to school for Facebook and not even tend to their work. And that's just not gonna look good to the school, because the school is here to help you, but yet they giving you Facebook, which is privacy. So I just feel like
that's great, and that's exactly the message that I've had from the students that I've interviewed, who've also said it's fine actually not to be allowed to use the phone in school. That's the way it should be. But I wanted to ask, so Chris has asked me on the group chat about the Digital Me social network platform, and Paul, you also implied that you have some other social network platforms. So I would love to hear what are the kind of models of how learning in different places could get connected digitally, but not on Facebook. I don't know whether, sorry, I addressed that to both Paul and Chris, which is,
Go ahead, Chris.
I'll actually, so I don't know much about, well, I know that Digital Me is a organization in the UK, and they've got a number of different projects in the sort of digital media space. But one thing they did do, and I'm not sure what the platform, it may not be called Digital Me, but they did build a social networking system and platform for explicit use in schools that was built with teachers and administrators as co-collaborators. So I'm just wondering if you had run across that platform at all in terms of
not really, and I'm going to go and find out about it. Yeah, I'll go and find out about it after.
Well, there's Make Waves in UK as well, right?
That's the same thing. That's it. Make Waves. That's Digital Me's platform. Yeah.
Right.
And for about 10 years, we've been running a social networking site on different platforms, and we're now on a Drupal platform called youthvoices.net. And it's not so, and we've had some conversations with Make Waves and so forth, and Kid Blog here in the United States also is a big kind of place where some of this happens. And we've made a decision to be like totally open, but we kind of manage everything. So yeah, so I mean, and if we had
and what is the benefit? Yeah, tell me why is it worth having
put words in Chappelle's? Yeah, do you want to say, and then if you don't say,
what's
go ahead.
good about it?
I feel Youth Voices is a good site for kids that's in trouble. Not even kids that's not even like getting bad grades. Like I just feel like Youth Voices is good because when we had regular classes in my school, like you couldn't go to you if you didn't want to go to class, you didn't have to go to class. I mean, it's not saying that you didn't have to go to class, but kids, I'm not going to class, so I'm just going to go somewhere else and just not go to class, stay in the bathroom or something like that because they didn't want to hear the teacher's mouth. They didn't want to sit in the class for a whole hour listening to teachers talk and have to write work and then make sure that they give homework. And it's just a whole lot of things in the classroom that I feel like kids would do better on computer because people use technology every day. They use computers every day. They use phones every day. They use iPads every day. So I feel like computers is a good way because kids like to go on the computers and check out images and stuff like that. So I just feel like the Youth Voices is better to me because it helps me on my writing because it's a whole lot of typing that you do because it's on the computer. And like words that I couldn't spell that I would quickly misspell if I was writing it on a pen and paper, and then like a teacher would tell me after it's been graded, like if I was on the computer, like the computer would just quickly correct me and I would know what, you know what I'm saying, like how to spell it. So I just feel like it's totally like a better thing. And then you have time to do it in school and you have time to do it at home whenever time that you wanted to. So I just feel like Youth Voices is like a good thing for me. And it's a good thing for other kids here too. So Yeah.
To definitely check that out. So I want to throw something back at you guys because we've talked about how Facebook is, something very private, and you might be doing nasty stuff on there, but I know how it's been used for good. So we know there's the Facebook groups, for example. UMedia in Chicago actually communicates with the youth that attend the UMedia there through the Facebook group, talks about events, talks about some other things. I've used Facebook groups for my makerspace here in Los Angeles as a way to communicate. It's actually one of the most effective ways that I have personally found to actually get parents to respond, alongside instructors and students and everything else. So, I mean, what do you guys think about that? Is it something that you've experienced as well, or is it just me?
I feel like it should be like I feel like it should be like a Facebook education. That would be like good because like if you get teachers can have Facebook, students can have Facebook, so that way if they get stuck, they can like inbox like how a regular Facebook is, like in private talk with their teacher, or if they having an issue, the student is bullying them, or if just anything, they could privately talk to their teacher on there. And like that's what I like. It should be like a Facebook education, and then like a Facebook for like private and meeting social people, because that's what I feel like Facebook is for social people, like meeting new people and like just exploring new things and showing people where you've been through, if you went to Las Vegas or anywhere, like stuff like that. Like, but I just think there should be like a Facebook education, because there are stuff that you could do, like groups like you've been to, like you did. So yeah, I feel like there should be like a Facebook education.
Yeah, I think Leanna wants to jump in here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I actually think that's an interesting point about, so in the groups that we look at, we actually see more connection and collaboration through platforms like Facebook or YouTube or even Twitter. And I'm wondering if part of the connected learning sort of enterprise might be to include conversations or lessons about these privacy issues that keep coming up, because even sort of the most savvy users, so we look at, for instance, one of the groups we look at, nerd fighters, a lot of them like to use the collab channels on YouTube. So, and those are public channels, right? But they actually use them to communicate with each other among small groups. So we've also found people sort of bracketing out, like they might use Facebook in a pretty benign way because they realize that their teachers or parents might be looking at it, but then Twitter becomes sort of this private channel for them, even though it's a very public channel. So I'm kind of wondering, like, if education about kind of how privacy comes into play when we use these different platforms might be kind of a way to, as you were suggesting, kind of having like a training around how to use Facebook or how to use these platforms and think about the implications for privacy. But at the same time, I also want to say, like, I've even seen teachers effectively use Facebook with their students and sort of have a more porous relationship, like friend their students and be available to their students via Facebook. And I know that was sort of taboo maybe 4 or 5 years ago, but I think it's becoming more accepted and people do it a little more regularly. So.
Yeah, I think the training is really interesting, and then something that came up was just the question of what is our ideal version of digital citizenship and what makes a young person a good digital citizen. And I think helping to define that, and then having training, mentoring, whatever makes sense to guide as you're learning and participating is important. So what do you guys think about that? What are some attributes of a good digital citizen for a young person?
Shall I kick off? I mean, I guess the obvious answer is that a good digital citizen is a good citizen, and it's somebody who discerns and behaves by kind of accepted social codes wherever they are, and acts in a kind of courteous and thoughtful and polite way, and so forth. And in a way, the question is, why do we have to ask this? Why do we ever think that the digital space would be a space where completely other things can go on, where people could be rude or indecent or hostile, or all those phenomena of flaming and sexting. We sort of think they've all been, someone earlier said, amplified. But we somehow, in the early days of the digital, we thought that would be a space where completely different things, more extreme, would happen. And now we are reappropriating the digital and saying, the offline rules apply online and social norms are the same everywhere. But there is still something about the way in which the digital amplifies and makes persistent and kind of, certain kinds of actions that in the offline world would have been just so transitory. And that's where we need to really think about digital citizenship. That in addition to the offline social norms that we want every young person to become enculturated in, actually we want every adult also to become enculturated in, there are these kind of additional ways of understanding how the digital environment can make things worse, can mean things are spread much faster, can mean that things aren't quickly forgotten in the way they would be in the offline. And that's where I think that the focus on digital. And I do think it should be a kind of significant responsibility of schools, even though they feel so burdened, because it is just a real task for parents who are trying very hard to respect their kids' privacy, I think, and don't want to be kind of always looking over their kids' shoulder and saying, show me everything you're doing. So, as schools have taken on that task of teaching sexual health or relationship and kind of moral, and they have a kind of an ethical brief as well as educational, or as part of their educational brief. And I would say that the digital should be part of that. I don't know if others agree or disagree.
Well, I wanted to hear from Chris. Is that something that you guys talk about at the hives, or do you have I mean, I know that you guys put on classes and stuff. Does that come up?
Yeah, it comes up. I think, well, one thing is a little bit of a point following off that, and then I can share one example of some ways that we explored this. But I get a little nervous when we make this separation that Facebook or other social media platforms are for your private life, when essentially it's not private at all. In fact, it's living in public. Just because a teacher or an adult influence chooses not to view that in some sort of respect of that individual's privacy, that doesn't mean it's a private space. And then there's a real loss of a teachable moment about actually how you exist in that space, and we're setting up maybe a false construct that that's a private space, where then if that plays out in a little bit, it could be dangerous if that plays out and we reinforce this idea that they're living a private life on Facebook, which is exactly the opposite. And so one way that manifested itself recently in a Hive program is that the local NPR station here, WNYC, has a group called Radio Rookies, where traditionally they've produced traditional sort of NPR-style radio essays, but with the emergence of digital media, they've taken those essays and made them more multimedia. And they did one about, a girl who did a story about how she shared an image and that blew up, and a lot of the sort of slut-shaming type of issues. And they actually ran a live chat, not that dissimilar to this, and then put it into Facebook and had all of those channels as actually a place in which to explore those issues and put a little, sort of the sanitizing effect of using those tools to discuss the issue. And the young woman was very brave in which to share that story and then have that be the fodder for a pretty distributed conversation. So we generally try to use those kinds of products that you create within their own learning journeys, and then how do you actually use the digital tools to amplify those and to add many people's voices in that conversation. So that's one example of what we might do, and looking to have Radio Rookies actually build that into a series where we basically use student work as a jump-off point for social network conversations.
One of the things that Jabal said a little while ago is that Facebook is a place to get popular, and we've heard that a lot. And so if you start with the students' self-perception of what this particular media is for, that tends to be what it's for. And what they tell us after working on a site like Youth Voices is that that's where I can go to say what I think, right? And it seems to me like we need to provide kids with more spaces to do rich stuff, that we should not limit ourselves to, you know, Twitter and Facebook, that we can do a lot more than that in our classrooms. So it's not about some of those other issues. It's about how much more we can do. And I worry a little bit about this digital citizenship because, yes, it's one of the important things, but you know what, reading and writing and thinking, and yes, I know those are connected, but if we can create spaces where kids can be reading and writing and thinking and interacting with each other in positive ways already, and then we can work on that, and then we can turn around and say, wouldn't it be great if you did that on those other spaces too, right? So I think they need the experience, the rich experiences in social media before they go back to those other spaces.
And like, it's kind of like You Voices is different from Facebook for the simple fact is that You Voices really don't talk about it. It's basically where you can make your own story up and you can give it a title, and whatever a person is feeling or whatever, you know, she wants to read about, all that person has to do is just type in, let's just say you want to read about or see what people read about Lincoln, or just feeling lonely, or dance, or doing hair, or anything. Every person that's just like you, it don't have to be a person that published a book or anything like that. It could just be anybody that feels the same way as you, and you could click on that person, read what that person is talking about, and also comment. And it's not even like a something where you could read about it and then nobody can answer your question, because it's like you just know, you don't know who that person who wrote it. Like, the person who wrote it can actually respond to you on whatever you're asking or whatever you feeling, or you could just write a nice comment like, oh, I you know, understand what you're talking about or whatever. So, and Facebook is just, I just feel like Facebook is just like too social. Like, we need to have something that's positive, because if not, then it's just gonna be everywhere. I feel like it's just gonna be everywhere.
Okay, so I had to find my mute button. We are getting close to the end of our hour. We knew it would go fast, and it definitely did. So I want to make sure everyone has a chance to share some brief last thoughts, and I'll call you out. So, Chris, are you ready?
Yes, sorry, I just had to unmute, and I'll be very quick. This is a great conversation. I think one thing that I'm inspired by connected learning and by the community, really, of people in the connected learning spheres, is that, we need to start generating more positive examples and more use case scenarios that have youth development and empowerment at its core. And because I'm really, we have to sort of beat back the fear narrative. I think it's too easy for people to revert back to that fear narrative, which I think generally isn't drawn out that much by the data and by the reality out there. And so I think we need to surface more realities that set up a positive frame and use scenarios. And I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Chris. Leanna?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think I want to agree with Paul a little bit about in terms of the literacies that we might want to develop. There are certain, digital literacies that students need, and familiarity with platforms, etc. But there are a lot of kind of old school skills, right, that are also transferable to life online. And a lot of the students that we look at actually engage in debate and discussion online in really sort of sophisticated ways. And I think that's certainly a skill that can be sharpened, in offline and in peer-to-peer settings as well as in online settings. So I think it's about finding a balance of what are the particular digital skills or particular technology skills that students need, but also kind of how do these old school debate and discussion or, writing skills or reading skills kind of also apply to that as well.
Thank you. Paul and Chappelle?
And one more thing about the the whole thing between classes inside the classroom and on U Voices that you cannot lose your work. You can never lose your work because it's saved onto the computer. So that's a good thing because I always have my work all over the place and everything like that. But I just feel like this was a good discussion, and I appreciate hearing everybody's point of views on the discussion, and hopefully I have a discussion with you guys soon. So yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm fascinated by the how it's like these different places online don't exist in some vacuum. That it's the perception of Facebook that the students bring into my classroom, and it's my perception of it, and it's my administrator's perception of it that we're dealing with here. And then some of the examples that you've mentioned, I'd love to learn more about. So thanks for helping me think about those things.
Thank you. And for me, I appreciate always hearing that, you know what, we can't forget about pen and paper and, you know, all those other tools that are still out there. So thank you. All right, Sonia, go ahead.
Well, I was going to tell you that I went for a walk the other day, and I walked past the children's playground with the swings and the slides and the everything. And on the gate, there was a sign. It said, "Children's playground. This involves risk!" Exclamation mark. And it was just a kind of a, yeah, we know there's stuff to worry about, but get in there and have fun. And I thought that was a really great image. And if my phone hadn't been out of battery, I would have shown you the image right now. So I think that's the kind of the ethos that we have to get through in schools and with parents as well. That yes, there is risk, but yes, there are also people who can kind of get the kids through it and past it. And then there are a lot of opportunities. And what I really take from the connected learning enterprise and all the kind of examples that you've been talking about is that there are lots of really kind of fabulous and exciting and positive things that kids could be doing with this technology, but we just need to tell them a lot more about it. So there's a lot more raising of awareness to be done there. But it was fantastic to talk to you guys. Thank you so much for your participation. I hope there are some echoes between Britain and America and kind of common experiences. And yeah. That was fun.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Sonia, and our guests, Chris and Leanna and Chappelle and Paul, and behind the scenes, John Bariloni, who is making all the magic happen today. To keep today's conversation going, we encourage you to continue using the Twitter hashtag #ConnectedLearning, or by posting in our newly launched Google Plus community. It's really fun. You guys should go check it out in there. By this afternoon, we'll have a full recording of this webinar and other curated content up on the archive webinar page on Connected Learning TV. And I definitely encourage all of our guests today to check it out, because I think that some of the things that came up were actually discussed specifically on some of those other shows. For the next couple of weeks, Connected Learning TV is running a mini-series based on the Connected Learning Synthesis Report that was just published last Tuesday. The fourth webinar in this mini-series will be Thursday, February 7th from 10 to 11 a.m. Pacific time with Craig Watkins and Julie Shore exploring how connected learning opens up pathways to equity and opportunity. So thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a fabulous day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.